Scouts Australia respectfully acknowledges the traditional custodians of the country throughout Australia where our activities take place today. We pay our respects to elders both past, present and emerging, and continue to recognise and embrace the important continuous history and connection to land and community of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders people.
Welcome to Scout Quest. I'm Patrick from Albany Creek Venturer Unit, and I'm a venturer in Queensland.
And I'm Charlotte from First Wollongong. I'm a venturer in New South Wales. Tonight we are excited to launch Scouts Australia's partnership with the Last Great First. In a world first, polar explorers Dr. Gareth Andrews and Dr. Richard Stephenson are preparing to embark on an 110-day, 2,600-kilometre unsupported full coast-to-coast ski crossing of Antarctica, almost exactly 100 years after the passing of the great Sir Ernest Shackleton. Scouts Australia are thrilled to be a community partner supporting these former Scouts.
In one of the hardest polar expeditions ever undertaken, the explorers will attempt to cross the entire continental mass of Antarctica coast to coast, including its permanent ice shelves, unsupported using manpower alone. Charlotte, this sounds pretty amazing. Sounds bigger than my Green Cord hike.
It sounds super cold. Shall we get started? I'm excited to hear about the journey.
Yes, let's do it. Welcome Gareth and Richard.
Hi everyone, it's a real pleasure to be here talking to you. We're extremely proud to be working with the Scouts on this epic adventure, and we want this expedition to be as much your expedition as ours, and we're looking forward to working with you over the next 18 months. As we go through the next hour, we'll take you through the expedition, and we'll take you through what Antarctica is and how we're planning this expedition. So let's go. I'm having a little bit of trouble here moving my slides forward. Let's just have a look here. Okay, I might have to work off this window here. So look, Antarctica, it's the frozen continent at the bottom of the Earth. It's one of the last places on Earth for true exploration, and it's 14 million square kilometers of ice and rock and glaciers and mountains. It's incredibly beautiful, and it's wild and dangerous at the same time. And so Rich and I, just the two of us, plan to cross the continent in an expedition that's never been completed before. So if you can imagine walking 2,600 kilometers, and then imagine that's up glaciers and through unexplored mountains, temperatures of -40 degrees and big polar storms, all dragging a 200-kilo sled with all the gear that you need to survive this amazing journey. So we're going to start at the Bay of Whales on the Ross Ice Shelf. You can see at the bottom of your screen, and then we'll go towards the South Pole and then up towards Gould Bay on the other side of the continent. And just to put this in perspective, this is a map of Australia inside Antarctica. It just shows it's just the immense size, and then New Zealand within Australia there. And just again to sort of put that in perspective, it's the same as walking 2,600 kilometers from Adelaide to Cairns.
So I guess that one of the big questions that you're all thinking is why have Gareth and I chosen to undertake such a epic adventure? And I guess for us it fits into these sort of three key tenets of our expedition: the crossing itself, the community that we're a part of and that we want you to be part of, and the climate. The crossing itself is incredibly inspiring. As Gareth says, this is really one of the last great polar journeys to be undertaken. Nobody has ever skied unsupported across the whole continent of Antarctica, from the coast where the ice meets the sea to the other side where the ice meets the sea. The challenge of doing that, the challenge of forging a new path across what is the Earth's really last true great wilderness is something that Gareth and I find incredibly exciting and inspiring, and we hope that you guys sort of share our excitement and the inspiration that we found in the idea of doing something sort of truly exceptional. The community aspect of it, we're enormously proud to be working with Scouts Australia. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to come and listen to us talk. We want this to be an expedition that as many people as possible can share in the joy and the amazement at the Antarctic wilderness. We want to take you guys with us on this expedition. As we'll talk a little bit about later on, Gareth and I are both doctors, and we're also incredibly proud to be supporting our colleagues on the front line of the global fight against the COVID pandemic. And finally, we all know that climate change is the great issue and challenge of our time, and we're privileged to be working with the Antarctic Science Foundation to collect climate data and do our little bit to in that global fight against climate change.
And we're just going to delve into a little bit of polar history here. So that the photograph here is of Sir Ernest Shackleton. He's a very famous British explorer who 100 years ago first conceived of the crossing of the Antarctic continent. And this is a little sketch that he drew at a dinner party when he was first sort of thinking about doing the crossing. Now, he sailed his ship in from South America towards into the Weddell Sea, and he sailed with another team from the other side of Antarctica to try and meet at the South Pole. But Shackleton's ship was icebound in the Weddell Sea, got frozen in the sea, and essentially they lost their ship. It sunk, and the team had to be rescued from Elephant Island in the Polar Sea. But Shackleton was a great man, and he took 2 scouts with him on this journey. So he put out an advert across the world for scouts to apply. He had 1,700 people, or 1,700 scouts, apply to go on this expedition with him, and he took 2 of them with him. And we really, really hope to get a couple of you guys to Antarctica with us as well. So Shackleton didn't manage to cross Antarctica. And the first team to actually make the journey across the entire continent was Sir Edmund Hillary, the first man to summit Mount Everest, and Sir Vivian Fuchs. And they did it in these hybrid polar tractors. And as you can see, there's one teetering on the edge of a huge crevasse here. And so it wasn't until 1958 that the continent was actually crossed. And yet to this day, it still hasn't been crossed under human power alone.
And one of the reasons, or the main reason that this has never been achieved so far is Antarctica itself. It's an incredible place. It sits there at the bottom of the Earth, incredibly remote, surrounded by the storm-racked Southern Ocean. Really difficult to even get to the shore of the continent. Once you're there, you'll find this vast wilderness of more than 14 million square kilometers with no permanent inhabitants. There's a few scientific research stations, but essentially it's just empty. It's the highest continent on Earth. It's the driest continent on Earth. It's the windiest continent on Earth, and it's the coldest continent on Earth. This is a really extreme environment. That's the sort of the wilderness that we want to be the first people to traverse under our own steam, pulling everything that we need behind us in our sleds from one coast to the other. You can see there on the map in front of you, you've got the Ross Sea sitting at the bottom, and below the Ross Sea, off the edge of the map here, are Australia and New Zealand, and the Antarctic Peninsula sitting on the top left of your screens, and that points at the tip of South America, just to orientate you a wee bit. And you've got the South Pole sitting there in the middle of the East Antarctic Plateau. We'll start on the shore of the Ross Sea, on the Ross Ice Shelf, and we'll ski what is essentially sea level across the Ross Ice Shelf. It's about 700 kilometers long in a straight line across a dead flat surface. The Ross Ice Shelf is incredible. It's essentially a permanent part of the continent. It's an extension of the landmass, but it's actually freshwater ice. That's snow that has fallen on the central Antarctic plateaus tens of thousands of years ago, and slowly been transformed into ice. And that ice has slowly flowed through the enormous glaciers that track through the Transantarctic mountains, down from the polar plateau at 3,000 meters down to sea level. And then it started to spread out along sea level. And at a certain point, it actually starts to float over the surface of the saltwater ocean. We'll ski straight across that in a straight line until we finally see the Transantarctic mountains looming in front of us. These are a vast barrier range of mountains pierced by these enormous glaciers, hundreds of kilometers long and tens of kilometers wide. And it's up one of these glaciers that we'll traverse the Transantarctic mountains. We'll break through those mountains and gain access to the polar plateau. And that's the center of Antarctica. That's really what Antarctica is about. It's really high. It's about 3,000 meters. So that's not far off the summit of the highest mountain in New Zealand. But of course, it's dead flat, incredibly windy, ice sculpted, hard environment. We'll have the wind blowing directly from the South Pole into our faces as you traverse those last few hundred kilometers to the South Pole. When we get to the South Pole, we're going to make a wee turn and we're going to start to head towards the other side of the continent. At this point, the winds will come behind us and we'll slowly make our way slowly back down to sea level. And we'll get to the Ronnie Filchner ice shelf, which is another one of these amazing freshwater ice shelves floating out over the Southern Ocean. And we'll cross over that and over an island, and eventually we'll reach the shores of the Weddell Sea on the far side of the continent.
So Rich and I have been adventuring together for 10 years, and over that time, the crossing of Antarctica has been our big goal. Both Rich and I started our adventuring lives as scouts. As scouts, we learned it's the first place we learned to put up a tent, to use a compass, and to work as a team in these extreme environments. And over the years and over our last expeditions, Rich and I have become a really tight team. But we're not professional adventurers. We're doctors, and adventure is our passion. But our jobs are in the hospitals, and this is us going to work and how we've been dressing for the last 18 months in the COVID pandemic. And our efforts over the last year have been very important to both us and our colleagues and our patients. So, like I said, over the last 10 years, as we've been building up to this Antarctic expedition, we first started our first expedition was to the magnetic North Pole, and it was a journey over a month, and it was where Rich and I really became the team that we are today, and it was the first time that we really got ourselves into some pretty sticky situations. And as you all know, out on the Arctic Ocean, you're in the land of the ice bears, and one night we were quite close to the magnetic North Pole, quite close to the end of the expedition. It was about 2 o'clock in the morning, and we were in our tent, snuggled down in our sleeping bags, and we heard a rustling outside the tent. And over the course of the expedition, we had Arctic foxes come and rustle through our things, and so it wasn't unusual. But then we heard one of our sleds being pushed and a spade fall over, and some big bear-like breathing. And so Rich and I were sat up in our tent, clutching our shotgun, just listening to this bear rummaging around outside our tent. And neither of us were game enough to stick our heads out and have a look what was going on. But when we got out in the morning, there were these big dinner plate sized paw prints all around our tent. So thankfully, there's no polar bears in Antarctica. We're just going to show you a little video now of what it's like to be dropped off on the edge of an ice sheet.
So as you can probably imagine, that's kind of the moment that we've been building towards. That's Gareth being dropped off on the edge of the Greenland ice shelf. But we'll have a very similar moment where we're dropped off by a plane, this time on the edge of Antarctica, and we'll have nothing with us except, you know, what we're standing up wearing and what we've got packed in our sleds behind us. And it'll just be me and Gareth. The plane will have disappeared, and we'll be standing staring out across the vast expanse of Antarctica, knowing that we've just got ourselves, our wits, our teamwork and our equipment to get us across the other side of the continent. And that's really the moment that we've been working towards, and the moment that fills us with such enormous excitement.
And so, you know, with this experience behind us, we decided that it was time to go for this big goal. It was time to make an effort to make the last great first happen. But on such a huge expedition, where do you start? Well, we looked at maps and we looked at satellite images, and we spoke to the experts, and we've put a plan together that we think that will get us across the continent in 3.5 months in the window that we need. We're just going to show another little video next of what a polar day might look like.
So I guess a lot of you are wondering, you know, what's it actually like to ski across Antarctica? And the answer is, you know, very much like this scene you see here in front of you. You've got vast expanse of white ice stretching out into the distance. You've got a team, in this case, of 2 people skiing along in a straight line as you can possibly manage to where you want to be, pulling your sled behind you. The polar day really revolves around covering as much distance as possible. We've got 2,600 kilometers to cover in 110 days. So we need to be averaging between 23 and 26 kilometers a day. So the key thing is to optimize how fast and quickly and efficiently we can cover that sort of distance. So we'll get up in the morning, we'll melt some ice and snow for water, we'll get out of the tent as quickly as possible. And then really we'll just spend the rest of the day, the next 10 hours, just skiing in a straight line. Every hour and a half or so, we'll have a break. We'll eat a bit of food, we'll have a bit of something to drink, and then we'll repeat that process 5 or 6 times. We won't have any big breaks and stop because you get too cold too quickly. You need to maintain this constant level of exercise. And we'll repeating that day after day after day. Hopefully, most of the time, we'll get some beautiful blue skies and we'll be skiing in fantastic conditions. But unfortunately, quite a lot of the time, it probably won't be like that. And if we move on to play the next video, you can see what conditions can be like sometimes. So this is a whiteout. So this is where the cloud has descended onto the ice, and looking straight ahead of you, the only thing you've got to orientate yourself is those man-made objects, the other people in front of you. There's no way you can tell the difference between the surface of the ice and the sky. It's really, really disorientated. Very easy to start skiing off in the wrong direction. Really easy to trip over because you only know where the ground is because your feet stop when you hit it. And those are the sort of conditions that you will really have to be. They'll really test us. Those will be the days where all our training, all our preparation, our physical preparation and our psychological preparation will come into play because they'll be the days that we have to be tough enough to get through.
So how do you prepare yourself to drag a 200-kilo sled 2,600 kilometers across Antarctica? Well, you spend a lot of time dragging heavy tires up and down beaches. And when you're in lockdown, you just do what you can. You stick your kids on a tire and drag them up and down the lane behind your house. But it's one thing to be physically fit and to be prepared in that way, but it's also so important to be prepared from a kit perspective. And a lot of the time that Rich and I spend is just working out exactly what we need and the best equipment. So this is us in Hobart with Eric Phillips, who's an Australian polar explorer and polar guide, and we're looking at a potential sled to take to Antarctica. But then there are other key bits of kit, and this is one of them. This is our tent. And it's going to be our home for 3.5 months. So this is what it looks like when you unwrap it from the pack. And this is what it looks like when it's up. And, you know, we practice over and over and over again, putting our tent up, taking it down, putting it up, taking it down. and it's all very well doing that on sunny days in the garden, but you need to, the reason we practice and practice and practice is for days like this. And we're just going to show a short little video now of a full storm. So you need to get your tent up in under 5 minutes. These are the most dangerous times of the expedition. It's -40. The wind is howling. The snow is blowing hard in a blizzard. This is the time where you get hypothermia, you get frostbite. It's either life or limb threatening. And this is the time where all your skills and all your training and all your teamwork really come to the fore. So you can get your tent up, you can get inside and out of the elements in under 5 minutes.
And one of the reasons that we've chosen to focus a little bit on the tent is that it's such a key piece of equipment on any expedition, and certainly on one like this one. This is the thing that allows humans to survive in this sort of environment. This is your shelter. This is the way you get out of the wind. This is the way you get out of the freezing cold. And for us, the idea of that sort of wind blowing outside, but inside your tent, you can sit there quite comfortably, having a drink, getting a map out to assess where you've been that day and where you're going to go the next day, really kind of epitomizes the spirit of adventure in these kind of hostile and extreme environments. And I think we've got another wee video just to show you a bit of kind of tent life, if you like.
Yeah, and here's the start of the river. Absolutely. This looks relatively flat. The contours, they're not particularly close together, so we may well get some paddling in.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. It's really nice. It'll be really interesting to see what the river's like, whether it's full of rocks or if it's actually quite open and braided. And like you say, if it's open and braided, then that means we can paddle it.
Yeah,
which is great.
We could getting somewhere around here.
Yeah, that'd be nice, wouldn't it? Getting somewhere around here. Get out.
Get
the
out
North
somewhere
Coast.
down.
Done. How hard can it be?
Done.
Easy.
All right.
Yeah.
Full sturker.
Full sturker.
And now we're just gonna tell you a little bit about the clothing that we wear and how we're going to dress ourselves to survive the elements in Antarctica.
And so look, I mean, it's hard to imagine anything more important, possibly apart from the tent, except for the clothes that you wear, that you stand up in. So this is a picture of Gareth on the Greenland ice cap, and you can see there he's got these specially designed polar cross-country skis. He's got these enormous polar boots on. I was going to bring an example to show you, but I forgot to bring it. But they're actually huge, enormous thermal insulated boots, because your toes are incredibly vulnerable to frostbite. We've got our jackets on to protect us from the wind. We've got a ruff of fur or fur substitute around the top of our coat, so we can pull over around our faces and provide this pocket of warm air to protect those areas of exposed skin that are delicate and vulnerable over around our noses, around our mouth and our faces. This is all of our gear, really, except what we're standing up in, sits in the sled behind us. Now on this expedition, because it's unsupported, that means we start with everything that we need to get across the continent. So our sleds are going to weigh about 180 to 200 kilograms. They're going to be about 5 times the size of this one you can see here. And they're going to be connected to us by a set of traces or lines that attach it to a harness around our waist. Every single piece of equipment we take is incredibly carefully chosen. We pore over the details of bits of equipment because they've got to last the expedition, and they've got to protect us, and they've got to survive the rigors of the Antarctic wilderness. So clothing and equipment is an enormously important part of the expedition, and one that we spend enormous amounts of time testing and trialing and preparing to make sure that we use the best stuff available. One of the other things that we need to be very careful of when we're in Antarctica is, one of the things that poses a big danger is the environment, the wind, the cold. But probably the biggest single objective danger really is one of crevasses. So this might look like some nice, smooth, sun-kissed ice that would be very easy to drag a sled over. But that smooth, flat section in the middle, that's actually an enormous crevasse, several meters wide and tens, if not hundreds of meters deep. Crevasses in Antarctica are really big. And that is covered with a layer of snow. And there's the snow bridge there. So you can hit, this is an open crevasse on a glacier in New Zealand. And that snow bridge is how you cross a crevasse. You've got to walk over the snow bridge. The big question is that snow bridge strong enough to take our weight and the weight of the 200-kilogram sled behind us? The only real way to know that is to walk over it and see what happens. So we spend a lot of time training and preparing in various mountains, particularly around New Zealand, for crevasse travel and rescue, because there is a reasonable chance that at some point you would fall down one of these crevasses. Very, very cold places. You haven't got long when you're down there to get yourself back up. And there's lots of sort of specialist techniques that we need to be aware of to get ourselves out of a crevasse or rescue each other if we fall down a crevasse. And of course, you've also got to know how to haul a 200-kilogram sled out of a crevasse if that goes through. So that's something we spend a lot of time training and preparing for.
And so one of the other key elements to this expedition is food. You know, how are we going to fuel ourselves so we can keep going day after day for 110 days? And you know, that means getting our food absolutely right. So the bulk of our food is dehydrated. So you can see these packets here. Each one of these packets is a meal. And so we'll have a meal in the tent for breakfast and dinner, and then when we're out on our skis, we'll just have a grab bag of snacks of chocolate and high energy salami and sweets and those sorts of things to keep the energy and the fires burning throughout the day. But we are taking a scientific approach to our food as well, so we know that we're getting the right balance of proteins and carbohydrates and fats. So that diet is sustainable for for that length of time. Now we're just going to show you another little video now of us. It'll be a tour around our tent.
Let me show you around our home. So this is my bed. This is Richard's bed. This is the map reading room.
Yeah.
This is the laundry. And there's the kitchen. What are you cooking, Rich?
Tonight we are having delights of, I'm doing 2 meals because it's special. We're having chili con carne and wash pork and beans. No expenses spared.
What's your favourite?
Chili con carne, and it's Gareth that's getting the chili con carne.
You!
I'm a little bit jealous.
So this is our little
And so, in all our expedition planning and all the adventures that we go on, our base, our rock, are our families. Both Rich and I are married and have kids, and our families. They give us a reason to go forward boldly, and to come home safely, and they're always in our thoughts in everything that we do. And so, look. That's our expedition, and in summing up, on a day-to-day, Rich and I are doctors, but our passion is adventure, and that really started in our early years as scouts. And as I said at the start, we would love this to be as much your expedition as ours. We're really looking forward to spending the next 18 months, working with you and involving you in this project as much as possible. So thanks very much for listening, and we'd love to take some questions.
Thank you.
Questions it is then.
Wow, what a journey you're both going on. The planning we do as scouts for a normal hike is big enough, but the preparation you are putting in is amazing. By the way, I'm Kayla, and I'm a scout at First Salisbury in South Australia.
Hi everyone, I'm Brendan from First Year of Campbell in Victoria. It's also very exciting that you'll be meeting with scouts all around Australia over the next year. And I hear you're heading to VicJam as well, so maybe I could be your private tour guide, get a bit of business going.
I'm happy to show you around JamX as well. Should we do some questions from the audience?
I think that's a great idea. Wow. If you have any questions, feel free to comment them in the chat, and we can get away to asking. Here we go. Sailors Bay Scouts asks, how many daylight hours are there in Antarctica? Is it less or more?
So for the duration, do you want to take this one, Rich?
Yeah, this is an easy one. So for most of our expedition, the answer is 24. So so obviously Antarctica being, including the South Pole, very close to the pole, even at the rim of Antarctica, which is 1,300 kilometers north of the South Pole. It is still close enough that during the summer, when we will be doing our expedition, there is 24 hours of daylight. The sun will get down towards the horizon, particularly at the start and the end of the expedition, but it'll never get fully dark.
Cool.
Danny Edwards, what technology will be used to follow your trip? Will you have a support team close by?
So yeah, that's a really good question. There are a couple of layers of technology that we'll use. So first of all, we'll use something called an inReach Mini from Garmin that you guys might be familiar with, and that's a little device that allows us to be tracked. It allows us to post our whereabouts on a map on our website that you'll be able to follow. But it also allows us to send and receive messages. We'll also carry a sat phone that we'll be able to communicate with our base camp with and use for emergencies. And we'll also carry a personal emergency locator beacon. And in terms of our support team, so they will be based in a place called Union Glacier, which is almost like a central expedition hub for Antarctica, and it's just nestled in the Pensacola Mountains on the Ronne Ice Shelf. So there they will have search and rescue aeroplanes ready to get in the air should we need any help. And so the way that our search and rescue is structured is that we will communicate with our base camp every day. If we miss 2 days of communications, then they will send an aeroplane to our last known location. So planning our search and rescue is a massive part of planning the expedition itself.
And it's probably worth just adding on to that. Sorry, is that our support team won't be close by. So from our start position, Union Glacier is about 1,500 kilometers away. So that'll be the nearest other human beings to us at that time. So we're very much on our own, and rescue is very weather dependent and is quite a long way away. So we need to be fully prepared to have to cope on our own for quite a long time, several days potentially, even if there is an emergency.
Nice, very prepared. Tom Miles asks, speaking of prepared, do you guys bring toilet paper or no?
So we'll bring everything. Yes is the answer to that direct question, and we'll bring everything that we need to survive for 3.5 months. And I would say toilet paper is pretty fundamental.
I say that too. Really.
Scott Nicholson, great presentation, guys. How does your stove and fuel cope with the extreme cold? How much fuel will you carry?
So that's a great question, and that's a key fundamental part of this expedition. So if you can imagine, the clothes and the equipment that we have with us and the tent and things, that's not for 110 days. That's not actually that much more than you'd need for a 4 or 5 day expedition. The thing that makes the difference for the extreme length of the expedition is the food and the fuel that you use. We're totally dependent on fuel. There's no liquid water in Antarctica, so all of our drinking water and all of our cooking water is melted snow and ice. So we have a very specific fuel calculation because taking any extra fuel adds weight to our sleds. So we have a very strict formula around how much fuel we can use per person per day, and then that's extrapolated over the course of the expedition. And we'll be using a very tried and tested form of stove, the MSR HGK stove. We'll have a couple of those with us, and that's been used in polar environments for years and is a very robust and reliable stove. Has a couple of special little bits that you add to it for polar environments, but essentially is very well designed to cope with an extreme cold environment.
Cool. Here we are. Kevin Brandt asks, can we talk to you when you're at the South Pole, or communications a bit fuzzy?
No, we certainly will be able to talk to you from the South Pole, and we're looking forward to doing so. we'll be able to have two-way conversations for the entire expedition. So there'll be some really fundamental or some really special moments in the expedition. We're planning on exploring a new route through the Transantarctic Mountains. So, when we get to the top of the glacier that's never been explored before and onto the polar plateau, that's a really special time, and hopefully we'll be able to communicate with you guys then, and at the South Pole, and as we get to the end of the journey as well. So yes, absolutely, there will certainly be two-way communications throughout.
Paul Hennessy, will you be taking a scout flag to fly when you've completed trip?
I think that's
Yes.
up to you guys. If you'll let us, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. We would love to. And we'll also be, you might notice that I'm wearing our expedition scarf, and Woggle will have one of these each with us, and we'll be wearing it like those special moments that I mentioned a moment ago when we reached the South Pole, and we'll be proudly wearing our scout scarves.
Nice. Here we are, Benjamin Holland. Do you have to treat the water after melting it, or is it safe directly after boiling?
It's safe directly after boiling, yeah. So it's a very, very clean environment. It's just so dry, so cold. Microbiological life is not a huge amount of an issue, so we can just drink it as soon as we've melted it. Good question, though.
Yeah, great questions, guys.
Laura Barrick, will you go near the dry valleys?
Wow, that's incredible. Sorry, I'm just reading the whole of the question. What an amazing piece of polar history that you're a part of. No, we won't. We won't, unfortunately. It's a place that I would really love to go, but our route takes us directly across the continent and not near the dry valleys, unfortunately.
Cool. Here we are, Cam Latt. Why is the climate and environment awareness a big part of the adventure to you guys?
Well, look, I think, we're all very aware of, climate change and its impact on the natural environment. I think that goes without saying with an audience like you guys. Antarctica is, it's one of the world's great barometers of climate change. It's an incredibly harsh wilderness, but it's a very sensitive wilderness, as are both sort of ends of the Earth. The Arctic environment's the same. The ice, we all talk about sea level rise, and why is a sea level rise? Where does all that water come from? And the answer is that water comes from the Antarctic ice sheet. So Antarctica is enormous, a huge amount of fresh water, way more fresh water than exists in the world outside of the Antarctic ice sheet is locked up in frozen ice at the South Pole. So what better place to go to showcase the fragility of the natural world, and what a better place to go to become part of helping solve that problem. Whilst we're there, the Antarctic Science Foundation is really keen to work with us. We'll be traversing parts of the world that very few humans, if any, go through. So collecting scientific data to help with the research to go to battling climate change is also a fantastic opportunity for us to contribute to that fight.
Nice.
Serge asks, has anything gone wrong in one of your expeditions?
Almost, but not quite.
Yes, the polar bear stayed on the outside of the tent, didn't it? So that was that doesn't really
It's a good
count.
track record.
I suppose the closest our last big expedition was to Iceland, and we basically traversed the country via the Vatnajökull, which is the largest glacier in Europe. And we paddled a river that had never been paddled from source to sea, and essentially around the source was unmapped. So we carried our rafts and we inflated them and paddled this river down to the sea. And because such little was known about it, and you've got to imagine this, it's a big, high, mountainous river, so it's all rapids and canyons. And at the start of the expedition, we said we don't know much about this river. We're going to have a no paddling in canyons policy. And then when we first got on the river, it was really gentle and braided, and we kind of got overconfident. And as the river went on, it started to dip into, I suppose, an ice gorge. So there was snow all around us and ice all around us, and we're paddling along. And suddenly we find ourselves in a situation where we just can't get off the river because there's ice on both sides. And ahead of us, the river just starts to dip away, and we just can't see where the river goes. And so we quickly scramble to the side of this river, stick in an ice screw, tether our boats, and scramble up and out over this, this gorge is a couple of meters high, and we look down the river, and just not far down is a big waterfall. So there's probably on all our expeditions, that's the closest we came to everything going really wrong. It all worked out. It all worked out in the end, but it's what happens when you don't follow the plan.
All right, here we are. Another one. Fiona Jelly, how many people will be part of your team, and did you say that you are taking scouts with you?
So in terms of the actual expedition team, that's just Gareth and I. It'll just be us two out there on the ice doing the expedition itself. We're part of we're the front people of what's a much wider team. We have an expedition chairman, Mark Richardson, who's listening to this call, who's been instrumental in helping us plan and prepare for the expedition. And we've also got people, polar expedition specialists like Eric Phillips. We've got people physical training, strength and conditioning training. We've got dietitians and nutritionists involved. So it's quite a big team behind us trying to make this possible. And their work is, at least as vital as ours, because so much of the success of an expedition like this is in the preparation phase before you even set foot on the ice. What we mean by taking scouts with us is there is potentially going to be the opportunity for some scouts to join us in Antarctica, not on the actual crossing itself. And that's something we're still working through. And we'd love for you as a wider community to be able to join us on the expedition through following us through tracking devices, social media, join us through the preparation and the expedition phase itself. But in terms of actually doing the crossing, that's going to be me and Gareth.
Scott Nicholson asks, how do you mentally prepare for 110 days of extreme adventure?
Look, again, a great question, and Rich and I have talked about the fact that this expedition it's got to be 80% mental, 80% mental, 20% physical. The mental aspect is huge. In terms of our mental preparations, I think they started all those years ago when we first started, exploring and adventuring together. I think it's a state of mind, and it's also a state of the team between Rich and I. Together we are mentally very, very strong because we support each other. We're like-minded. We approach problems in the same way, and we do it all with a sense of humour and a smile. And I think that. So in answer to the question, it's about building the right team and putting that together with past experiences, because this will also be the longest unsupported polar ski expedition in history. So no one's done this for this long before, so it's almost impossible to simulate. So we have to go on what we've done before.
Nice. Kristen Rees, what has been your favourite expedition? Stellar work, guys.
Oh, that's a good question. I think for me, it was probably our most recent kind of major expedition together, which was our crossing of Iceland, which we did in April 2019, I think. And that was the first time there's been an unsupported expedition across Iceland by ski and packraft, and that was this combination of paddling across ice lagoons and down this uncharted river, and also skiing across the Vatnajökull ice cap, pulling sleds behind us. So it was a fascinating expedition from a sort of equipment and logistics point of view, because we had to because we want to do it unsupported, and that means taking everything with you from the start to the end. We needed to have an inflatable raft, a pack raft to paddle. We needed to have a sled to pull things behind us on the ice. We needed to have skis to ski across the ice. So you can, and we also all had to be able to carry it all in our backs in a backpack. So you can imagine the equipment. Our backpacks were these ridiculous things. They weighed 50 kilograms. They had a sled strapped to one side, an inflatable raft, and some oars and paddles strapped to the other side of them. And when we had a raft, we had skis and a sled strapped to the outside of the raft. And it was a fascinating expedition. And from that point of view, and Iceland's an incredible place. It's a beautiful, stunning environment. And I think, and that was the last big expedition Gareth and I did together, and so that really sticks in my mind as a fantastic time, and the last big thing before we move on to this one.
Crystal asks, do compasses work in Antarctica?
Yeah, look, they certainly do, in the days of modern technology, a lot of navigating is done with GPS units and things. But on an expedition like this, it's almost impossible to just it's almost like being adrift on a big white ocean, and it's almost impossible to navigate on any features on the ice sheet. And it's very difficult to just stare at a GPS the whole time. So we use compasses as our main tool on almost all our expeditions, and so it's very easy to take a compass bearing, to have it on a little especially made dock that sits in front of you, so you can ski and just keep your bearing. And we also use the sun a lot, the position of the sun in the sky. So we use a lot of different modes of navigating. But yes, compasses certainly work.
Coolio. Melinda Coupland-Thorne asks, what kind of animals do you see on the way, aside from the bears and foxes you were talking about?
Well, on this expedition, we won't be seeing any animals at all, unfortunately. There's no bears and foxes at the South Pole. They're all up at the North Pole. And in terms of Antarctica, there are no land animals at all. There's penguins that move onto the ice around the coast in certain places, but for breeding purposes. But other than that, there's essentially no wildlife whatsoever in the centre of Antarctica. So for at least 109 of those 110 days is essentially no chance of us seeing any form of wildlife at all.
Which, and it's a bit of a shame, really, because Antarctica is this incredible, unique ecosystem. But all the amazing penguin colonies and the seals and the whales and all the marine life are obviously all around the edge of the continent. And so, we're just essentially just walking into a big white empty space with no animals.
James and Tanya ask, are you nervous to go on this adventure?
Yeah, I think I'd be lying if I told you I wasn't nervous. Yeah, absolutely. This is going to be without doubt the hardest thing that I'm ever going to do in my life, and I'm sure the same thing goes for Gareth. There's a very good reason that this has never been done before, and it's because it's really hard. So, we are under no illusions about how hard what we are attempting is to do, and the prospect of putting ourselves and our bodies pushing them right through the limits of human survival and endurance is a scary prospect, but it's also incredibly inspiring and exciting. And I think for us, those two things are almost you can't separate them out. One of the things that makes this so inspiring, so exciting, is the very nature of it, that also means that it's so tough and it's so difficult and it's going to be so hard to achieve. And I think all those things are intrinsically kind of linked and all part of what makes this such an amazing experience.
All right, so we've got one more question. Amazing questions. That was a lot. Very good work. Lastly, Benjamin Holland, how will you manage the sunburn and the reflecting off the ice while you're there?
So it depends. It really depends on the conditions and the temperature and the wind speed and all those different things. The majority of the time, especially when we're on the polar plateau, and you've got to remember that the South Pole is at around 2,800 meters. And so when we're up there, when it's really cold, we won't have any skin showing at all. So we'll have our hoods up and our ruffs around our faces, our goggles on, and a face mask with just a small space for our mouth and nose. But on the days, on those slightly warmer days, when conditions are right, for example, on the Ross or the Ronnie ice shelves, basically we'll have maybe glacier goggles on, but also still have our hoods up to shade us from the sun, and then lots of factor 50.
Cool.
So that's a really good question, because it's managing your skin and sunburn and windburn and things is a really key element to surviving such a long period of time in that environment.
Gareth and Richard, thank you for joining us tonight and explaining to all the youth around Australia what the last great first is. I'm sure we will all follow your journey, and maybe some of us can even be at the finish line in Antarctica to see you complete this awesome adventure. I hear South Australia's Chief Commissioner, Jan, is definitely wanting to be there.
Thank you so much for having us, guys. It's been an absolute pleasure. We're proud and honoured to be associated with the Scouts. Thank you for taking some time out of your evenings to listen to us talk about our adventures, and we really hope that we can get as many of you sharing this as much as possible for the next couple of years.
Yeah, thanks so much. It's been wonderful to talk to you.
Amazing. Most people during COVID, they find some hobbies, but these guys, they're off the charts. Amazing. Before we finish, we do have some exciting things for all the Scouts around Australia to get involved in. Firstly, you surely must have noticed our white and turquoise scarves and the woggle we have been wearing tonight. This is the official last great first scarf and woggle. These can be purchased as of tonight at the Scout shop, and the link right there. Even more exciting, we need your help to name the penguin that is on the woggle, as he is the mascot of the expedition. And frankly, he's going to need a name.
You can submit your suggestions via the link on the screen, and the winner will get a $50 voucher to the Scout shop.
I'm going to suggest Penguin Paul. Please feel free to also suggest that. Thank you for joining us tonight all across Australia, and I would love to thank our youth hosts, Charlotte, Kayla, and Patrick, as well as our amazing guests, Gareth and Richard, and of course, me. Have a great night and see you soon. We'll finish with a short video on the expedition. Thanks. Bye.
We're attempting to be the first team in history to ski across the entire continent of Antarctica unsupported. It's on the brink of what's humanly possible. We'll have everything that we need to survive for 3.5 months in our sleds to cover 2,600 kilometers. This will not only be the first completely unsupported ski crossing of Antarctica, it will also be the longest unsupported ski expedition in polar history. Since 2013, when we skied together to the magnetic North Pole, this has been our big goal. Our friendship is based on trust and respect, and that forms the basis of our team. We need to be strong enough and endurance fit enough to drag a 200-kilo sled 10 hours a day. So in February this year, we had our route set and our logistics in place, and then the COVID-19 pandemic happened. And Rich and I are passionate adventurers, but first and foremost, we're doctors. So we put the expedition to one side to put all our time and focus to our patients and our colleagues and our families through what's been a very challenging period. I've had to be quite inventive with training during lockdown. All the gyms are closed, can only go a certain distance away from home, so I've been running across Cardiff and finding parks to drag my tyres through. And when I'm training, it gives me that chance to plan and think clearly. And when life is so busy, it's really nice to have that time. We have the opportunity to achieve something that no one has ever achieved before, to push the boundaries of what's possible, to inspire a generation of young adventurers to chase what they're most passionate about, and through hard work, determination, resilience, they can achieve whatever they set out to.